All right, welcome back to Lost for Words with Lori. It is December 7th. It is about 9:36 p.m. And I just wanted to get back with y'all and let's cover another wonderful topic. You know how it is. Inspiration comes from toxic cesspool world. We're going to cover something that I've wanted to talk about. I don't know if I've actually even covered this already, but you know how that goes. I haven't really covered it, but it kind of goes along with everything else that I talk about here on Lost for Words. Let's talk about accountability tonight, and accountability for one's actions. I'm tired, guys. I'm real tired. I'm not sleeping. I have a tendency to sit up and stew and think and do the things that the Lori do, and lately it's been naps. I'm getting like a 90-minute nap before I have to work, and trust me, working a 8-hour day after you've been up for almost 24 hours is not easy, considering the type of work that I do, and numbers make me angry anyway. So I'm tired, and I'm exhausted, and I become emotionally exhausted by all of the crazy chaos with the trolls and the clout chasers and the victims and the attention whores lately, the drama that goes on in toxic cesspool world. And you know, it's weird. It's very cyclical, and there's like this shift, I think, in the universe that we all kind of feel. We feed off of each other's energy, and when the energy is really good, we all feel that, and when the energy is down, we kind of unfortunately feel that as well. Some of the empaths and the clairvoyant people that are in that circle of paranormal people will definitely recognize that, and we all know that, you know, you give off that energy and people will feel that, and a lot of times when it's positive, it's a wonderful thing, but when it's negative, it's dark, and that energy, you can feel it kind of running around, and creating a little bit of chaos. And things were real quiet for a while, and that was really great, and then things got crazy again, and I got real tired, and the last day has been a real drain, a real energy drain for me anyway, and you know, my first world gets a little chaotic as well. But yeah, accountability. God, I could go a lot of places with this subject. I guess the perfect place to start is, you know, we all have a past. You know, I'm 50 years old, so I've got quite a past to go from. You know, most people here only know a very small piece of what my life was like prior to even YouTube, or even prior to my life in North Carolina. And everybody's got a past, and we've all done things. I mean, especially when we were kids or when we were teenagers, that, you know, we maybe aren't necessarily proud of. But you know, when you do your past, and you're learning and you're growing and making mistakes, especially when we're teenagers, that you find out what the rules are about society or about things, and you make a lot of mistakes, and you're held accountable for those things. Kind of like when you're in school and you know, get suspended for, you know, smoking on campus, or, you know, doing things that you're not supposed to do, and you get held accountable for those things, whether it's being suspended or, you know, in school suspension, or whatever it is that you have to pay the penance for whatever it is that you were doing, but you were held accountable, and you did your service, or did whatever it was, and then you were expected to correct said behavior, and then you could go back to your regularly scheduled schooling or whatever it is. And some people made, you know, harder mistakes, poorer choices, and their accountability would be worse, whether it be legal trouble or jail, or, you know, in some cases substance abuse, where, you know, you were put into a program so that you would be able to get well, and some people had mental illness and needed to go get you know, help for that. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a mistake, but it's things, behaviors or issues where people had to be accountable for those things. And most of the time, growing up, you learn, how to basically get past those things, and you learn how to resolve conflicts, and you learn how to own your accountability, own your shit, and fix those behaviors so that you can do better next time and not make those same mistakes and become good productive members of society, I guess, is really what that's about. And then there's some people who don't. It's interesting when we talk about trauma and people who experience trauma growing up, I being one of those people. And, I've been bitching and complaining and talking a lot about victims and attention whores and those kinds of people on a lot of my podcasts, and the difference between victims and survivors. I'm a domestic abuse survivor as well. I was a victim of child abuse. Gratefully, my mother, in her infinite wisdom, was able to get out of that situation when I was young enough and intervene in a positive way where her children were given the tools through therapy and through programs, and took advantage of those things where we were given the ability to learn that those types of traumas are not acceptable, and get past those things as children and as young adults, so that I had learned that you aren't allowed to let people abuse you or physically harm you, and it never became a problem for me. Unfortunately, a lot of young people don't have that, and they grow up thinking that that kind of abuse is acceptable, and it's a cyclical thing where they learn that it's acceptable, or they don't know any different, and it causes a lot of emotional problems for them. And so they learn very early that there's no accountability for people hurting them, and therefore, as they grow up, there's no accountability should they turn around and do those things as well. So it's an unfortunate thing where a lot of these people who are victimized and treated poorly and have trauma at a young age do not learn to be accountable, and do not learn positive conflict resolution, and then therefore they turn around in their adult world, regardless of whether they were trauma survivors or abuse victims, or if they made poor decisions or did drugs or had issues growing up where they made bad decisions and went to jail, or had other problems, but were never felt like they had been rehabilitated or had a fair shot or got treated fairly or just, and didn't learn proper ways to resolve conflict, and that messed a lot of people up, and therefore that changes people. And if you're not taught growing up that when you make mistakes you are held accountable, and you can get past that by doing better and trying harder and getting past that and positive reinforcement, you have a tendency to treat people poorly the rest of your life. And it's unfortunate that adults treat other adults, and unfortunately other children. It becomes a cycle of self-destruction that has a tendency to ruin them for the rest of their lives in relationships, and they don't become productive members of society. And it's very sad, because a lot of people in my second and third world here are experiencing that from some very damaged individuals who believe that it's acceptable to lie and it's acceptable to treat people poorly, and to them it's okay. It's perfectly okay, because they're just looking out for themselves, and them getting the attention that they need or the clout that they need or whatever is perfectly okay, because the ends justify the means to them. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who they hurt or what kind of lies they tell, as long as they achieve their goal and their agenda is met. And in my world, it doesn't work like that. I don't believe that anybody has the right to knock on my boundaries and lie to people or myself or anybody I care about, and blatantly get away with it. And there are consequences for your actions, whether it be, when we were kids, if you were to do that stuff, you would get your ass beat at the bike rack after school. And unfortunately, in toxic cesspool world, people have become very comfortable with talking a lot of shit behind a keyboard because they don't believe that there are any consequences for their actions. And then it makes it very easy for them to basically manipulate electronically what's going on behind the scenes. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people don't have time to spend manipulating this big game electronically that other people do. I mean, I have a job. I can't spend 24 hours a day sitting around on a computer fucking with people's bullshit because I have responsibilities. And these people don't care about that because they have nothing else to do. They have nothing good going on in their life, and they have no self-worth, and they have nothing good. And some of that is no fault of their own. But at what point again, I've covered this in enabling, I've covered this in shit starters, I've covered this in all of the podcasts that I've had about bottom feeders and clout chasers and trolls. At what point do we as a community allow that kind of behavior to continue and allow people to victimize other people and not call them out on their crap and hold them accountable and have consequences for their actions? I thought about, because they've trolled me and said, oh, why don't you just shut your page down, and why don't you just fuck off and die and not be here and just stop being on Twitter and stop doing this. And I'm like, why? Because you want me to? I mean, does that mean you win? What is that going to do? It basically means that my presence bothers you because I know the truth and I know what you're about and I call it like I see it. People don't like that. They don't like reminders, so to speak, of the bad behaviors that they've done. And it's unfortunate because all you really need to do is just own your shit. Be accountable. We're all human. We all make mistakes. I'm the first person to admit when I've made a mistake, and I apologize for it. But nobody wants to come and admit that they've made a mistake. And even worse than that, nobody wants to even tell somebody when somebody's being an asshole. If you're talking to your best friend and they hurt your feelings, what's so bad about saying, dude, that was not cool, maybe you should have said that different. Nobody wants to communicate. Nobody wants to do the hard work. And at some point, we as humans have lost the ability to own our accountability for our behavior because nobody has consequences anymore. When we were kids, if you mouthed off to your mother or your father, they would wrap you upside the mouth or wash your mouth out with soap or bend you over and paddle your ass. And now there are no consequences. And I'm not saying that those things are acceptable now. Society changes, it evolves. I'm not condoning those things. But again, we all grew up knowing that if we misbehaved, we had consequences. Now, when my daughter was young, consequences changed. I didn't spank my child. I didn't, wrap her upside the mouth when she talked back. But we learned different ways to resolve those conflicts by timeouts, by sitting them down and communicating with them, by asking them, or trying to get them to calm down when they were having tantrums and try to, dissolve anger and tantrums in their real time to find out what was behind it or distract them or whatever. But we learned different ways as society evolved, and we realized that, spanking and violence didn't solve anything. But again, there were still consequences. When my child would slam a door, the door got took off the hinges until she learned to not slam the door anymore. Again, it's a conflict resolution to be accountable for bad behavior. Slamming the door is not good behavior. but it opens the dialogue for why are you angry or what are you upset about. But adults should be able to do that. I do that in my first world with the people I'm closest to. I did it with my fiance. We were learning to talk to each other about the things that bothered us. That's what adults are supposed to do. Excuse me. Children blame other people and throw tantrums and act out. And they keep repeating those behaviors until they learn proper coping skills and how to resolve conflicts. But again, there's no shame in that, but it's something that you learn to do growing up, or by example, or by being properly given the space or the place to do those things. But again, there's no shame in being human. That's what we're about, is learning to adapt and to change and to figure out a better way to do things. And I don't understand why people are so afraid to communicate, and why people are so afraid to say, yeah, you're right, I'm wrong, and I'm sorry. Or, I don't have to be right about everything. But I do know the truth about certain things, and I know that I'm 100% right about very specific situations, and I call it like I see it. Why would I not be a critical thinker and present the facts the way they are? And in toxic cesspool world, if two people are beefing about something, it should never have gotten to the point where it ends up being public. But once it becomes public, consider the source. Who started it? Where did it come from? And why is it necessary? And 90% of the time, the person who brought it up in the first place is being an attention whore or a victim, because they've got an axe to grind, or they're looking for some kind of attention, or they're feeling guilty for something that they did, and they're trying to basically turn it around, gaslight, narcissist, whatever it is, because most people who make mistakes and are afraid to admit that they've done something wrong are obviously going to point the finger somewhere else. It's easy to do, and especially in a virtual world. But you have to ask yourself, if you're a critical thinker, who's got the most to gain from it, and who has nothing to gain from it? I didn't try to make a big deal about a lot of that shit, but of course I'm like anyone else. If you back me into a corner, I have a right to defend myself. And what do I have to lose by telling the truth? Nothing. If I made a mistake, I'll be the first person to admit it. But I know how to resolve conflicts. And again, I'm an open book. I have a first world. You can ask anybody what kind of a person I am. I have no reason to lie, just like anybody else. But what you see is what you get. My whole purpose of trying to talk to people and try to give information and try to speak with people, it was just like anybody else's, was to make friends, to promote other people doing good things. But if I'm cheering loudly for everyone else who's doing great and not throwing myself out there, that I think that speaks volumes about my character versus other people who are only throwing themselves out there and then throwing other people under the bus when they don't get their way. So again, critical thinking is, we know who knows how to resolve conflicts, and we know who throws tantrums when they don't get their way. I have no problem apologizing for the mistakes that I may or may not have made. But to me, words are empty and hollow, and the best apology is changed behavior. Now, I've made mistakes. I've made mistakes in toxic cesspool world with people where I made poor judgment, and I apologized for those things. And I've proven by changing my behavior and helping and supporting the people that I had to apologize to months before. And that's on us. That's between me and them. But they forgave me, and now the relationship is fantastic. Good friends, honest, open communication. If I'm out of line and they feel like maybe I might have said something, they're going to call me out on it, and they know that I'll own it. And that's the way that friendships and relationships should be, whether they're electronic or in person. And I think that's an important thing. We learned how to resolve a conflict where I was able to say that I was wrong. And now for future reference, we can look back on that experience and laugh about it now and say, man, you know, and at least give ourselves enough credit for recognizing that, you know, we're both stubborn, or I'm stubborn, or I'm protective, or whatever the argument was about. And maybe that's not such a bad thing to be, but realizing that, hey, that might have been a coping skill from my past that no longer serves me. So I'm learning and I'm growing and evolving, but that's what adults are supposed to do. Again, to reiterate, there is no shame in being human, but it's about being able to get past it and still be accountable. And the people who don't, those people will be victims for the rest of their lives, because they don't know what it's like to stand up for themselves, to just own their stuff, and they continue to tell more and more falsehoods. And then when the truth comes out, they spend the whole time going, see, I'm being brutalized, I'm being victimized, because that's all they know. And instead of saying, you know what, I might have made a mistake, and therefore you earn a little bit of credibility from that, and then how do I change that behavior so that people will understand, they will listen, they will respect me. But if you're going to lie about one thing and you get called out on it, and then you refuse to accept responsibility for that, then anything else that you tell people automatically becomes suspect. And that's unfortunate, because that means that for me, if anything that I would have said would have been false, then nobody could believe that I would have been a survivor of child abuse or anything like that. And then what am I supposed to do? But again, you choose what you want people to know about you, and then what's the agenda? I don't need to tell anybody anything about my past, because it's irrelevant in the social media place. So you have to ask yourself, why would anybody choose to share that information with you in the first place? Is it relevant to what they're trying to do on their channel? Is it relevant to what they're trying to do to help people? Or if they're a content creator, what difference does it make whether they had that happen? Is it for attention, or is it for clout? Is it to get sympathy? Chances are it might be, because honestly, what other reason is there for you to bash all your personal information out there when it's really not relevant to what you're creating for content? I don't understand that. For me, the only reason that I tell you that is because it proves my point that I'm not asking anybody to give me any sympathy about my past. I don't bring it up. It's not part of what I do. Now, in my first world, I'm dealing with a lot of trauma and a lot of grief, but I do a podcast, and my podcast is going to be geared toward helping other people deal with what I'm dealing with right now in my first world. And to me, that's a wonderful thing. So, am I looking for sympathy? No. Should I get sympathy? Maybe. But what I've been through is monumentally terrible compared to what's going on with anybody else who's had to deal with that. So there's really no reason why we shouldn't all join forces and talk about that subject matter in a safe space where we can deal with it. It's no different than other content creators who want to talk about baking cookies, or people who talk about music. We have a platform for that. You guys do your, whatever your craft is, if it's, anime, if it's gaming, if it's anything. But if you choose to bring drama into it and share things to get attention and make people feel sorry for you, then that's on you. But is it necessary? Probably not. And then to try to turn that around and use it as a tool, there's no accountability for that in toxic cesspool world, because you don't have any consequences. But if you're going to use it as a division tool because you're not getting attention and other people are doing better, or they're not giving you the attention that you seek, and then try to cause problems because of it, it's kind of childish, and it makes you look crazy and silly. Again, there's no shame in being human. Accountability basically just means that you need to accept that you are human, that you make mistakes. And if you were an adult about it, you could just say, you know what, I'm sorry. We all have a past. We've all been victimized in some way. A lot of us have been through tremendous trauma in our childhood, have been through unspeakable things that a lot of people have mental issues or have a lot of trauma that they don't get past. But we don't turn around and treat other people terribly because of it. We try to find the best ways that we can. We use the resources that are available to us. And we try to be good humans and try to be better versions of ourselves the next day. I mean, to be very blunt and to use a worst case scenario, I could have shut down and I could have terrorized a lot of people after what happened to me with losing Toby. And I chose not to. I chose in my first world to go to therapy, to talk to the people I'm closest to utilize my first world sources, my friends, my family, to try to navigate that grief path. And I'm going to try to do something good with it. And in my third world, in Toby's world, with the friends that he made, I tried to be a positive place to try to help those people grieve for the loss of Toby in their way, and also try to encourage those people and get some closure in Toby's world. And when that's done, I may end up not being in that world. But I could have terrorized everybody and been angry and bitter and cried and begged for sympathy and used that. And to what advantage? Eventually people would have been like, oh, there she is again, and nobody would have wanted me around, and boo-hoo-hoo, there she is. What kind of negative attention? Why would I even ask for that? Because to me, becoming a better version of myself within this tragedy means that I can help other people maybe, and find some friends who also have been through the same thing that I have, and maybe we can all get through this horrible kind of thing together. Instead of sitting here in the dark by myself crying over the loss of Toby, maybe helping other people. And to me, that's accountability in itself. You know, that's holding me accountable in my own emotions for maybe a lot of the things that most people can't come to terms with when it comes to grief. But it also helps me help other people realize that there's no shame in being human, and that we can all learn to resolve conflicts. But these are things that I've been thinking about in the last day. You know, when I talked about updating and what I've been looking forward to, and how I've been trying to process my grief, and how I want to figure things out. And I was real excited about it. And then more drama came along, and it knocked me down a few pegs. And I'm on an emotional roller coaster already, and I started to get angry again. And I'm dealing with all of that. And I started thinking about accountability, and I started thinking about consequences. And I think it's really important that people really stop and start taking a look at those things and how it affects them in their first world, in their second world, in toxic cesspool land. And think about, if you were to pull some of the things that you do in person, what would the consequences be? If you weren't hiding behind a keyboard, or hiding behind a camera, or hiding behind a microphone, what would the consequences be for what you were doing? I don't honestly think there would be consequences for anything that what I'm doing other than friendship and goodness and maybe some healing. And I'm okay with that. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not talking shit. And if I am, and you want to talk to me about it, you know where to find me. I made that pretty clear in my last podcast. You want to clear the air with me? Come be an adult. Come talk to me. And let's have an open dialogue. But if you lie to me, that's a whole nother ballgame. We got trust issues, you know? But I'm not a doormat, and I establish boundaries. That's part of healthy conflict resolution. It's part of growing up and not being a victim. It's part of all of the process of people taking their dirty laundry and their trash and they're unpacking their baggage from their past. And if it doesn't no longer serve you, then don't take it into your future and punish everybody around you because you were treated poorly. Because you will be held accountable. There are consequences for your actions. And if you think you're safe hiding behind a keyboard, they're passing laws. There are cyberbullying things. There are things that people can do to hold you legally accountable, and you can get in trouble for that. And it does happen, and it can happen. You know, I'm just a normal human who's learning to deal with that stuff, and I'm not going anywhere because I want you to remember. I want you to see me there. I want you to know that you're still going to be accountable. And it drives you crazy, I know that. It's not the kind of attention you want. It's negative, not positive. And you can cry, poor me, feel sorry for me all you want, but you put yourself in these situations, and eventually the truth does come out. You know, you reap what you sow. But there are consequences. And you don't have to choose that way. You can learn to resolve your conflicts in healthy, positive ways. And you can reap the benefits of that. Good friends, positive things, good energy, and the dreams and the things that you desire will come to happen. So tell me what you think. What do you think about accountability? What do you think about conflict resolution? What do you think the stumbling blocks are? How do we fix the problems? I know a lot of people think that ignoring it makes it better. A lot of people try to play Switzerland. A lot of people, I don't know. Tell me what you think. You know, I get tired of trying to herd cats and trying to tell people this is how you should handle it. Nobody's going to tell you how you can handle that kind of stuff and how people... I can only be accountable for what I do. But I can establish those boundaries with people who want to try to mess with me when it comes to treating me with bad behavior and the consequences and what those consequences are. I've been very clear with people about what those consequences would be. Learn how to resolve conflicts like adults, not children. Let me know what you guys think. I want to give a quick thank you to everybody who helped me reach a milestone today. Not that I'm super trying to build a channel, but we are really trying to get some direction on doing some things to help people. So thank you very much for those who are following and listening along. I really appreciate all your support. So thank you for listening today. Until then, wash your hands, be a good human, and we'll see you next time.